Let me say yeah. Let me say yeah.
All right, we're back. The Cheap Seats Hockey Podcast. Myself, Phil Stockley, and we have Jimmy Ward with us again. Jimmy, how are you?
Doing well, Philip. I'm doing well as usual.
Yeah, finally, 8 episodes in, and we finally got another guest with us. Why don't you tell us who's here, Jimmy?
Well, we've got a guest who I'm hoping is going to be a regular on the program here and there. We've got Nick Nosebleed, right out of the witness protection program. So, Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Phil and Jimmy. I appreciate the opportunity. I've literally never done this before, so I hope that I don't ruin your show and cost you listeners.
Don't worry about that. I'm sure you're going to bring a plethora of knowledge to this program, and looking forward to it. It's going to be fun having this conversation here.
Yeah, Nick Nosebleed. He wandered up here to the cheap seats, and we got
Got his
talking, and
ticket.
we thought, yeah, you know what, this guy'd be a pretty good ad, and you're a Philadelphia Flyers fan. Um, it's got to be kind of nerve-wracking right now. How are you feeling about the Flyers, Nick?
I mean, in my not so professional opinion, I mean, regardless, they beat the Rangers tonight. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I'd be shocked if they did. It's too much of a logjam there. I think the Islanders winning tonight basically puts them, I think, right in. They're I don't think they're going to drop out of the race, and they're going to probably finish third in the Metro. And Pittsburgh and Washington, Detroit, and Philly are all separated by a point, but Philly's played one more game than they have, and I just don't think they're going to get in.
Yeah, so that's a really good transition to the Eastern Conference playoff run right now, and that race for that final wild card spot. It's just changing every single night. Jimmy, what like I who did you call to get in last episode? I said the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to get in. They are in right now as we speak. Who did you say?
I think I said the Washington Capitals, but I could be wrong.
Or did you say Detroit?
I could have said Detroit too. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Um, I
It's
think I kind
crazy
of.
though. Hey, it's like again though, Crosby tonight. Was it a goal and two assists?
Yeah, he's doing something. I mean, like I said, he's terrorized my team for so many years, and it looks like he's just like he's not going to be denied this time. And it's really fascinating to watch because they're like I said, their core players have played well all year, and they're continuing to be at their best at the right time. Um, got a couple tough games coming up, but very interesting. Tuesday, April 16th, it's Flyers Pens in Philadelphia. So that'll be an interesting game. But they got Tampa and Boston. Sorry, that's Washington's schedule. Tampa, Boston, Philly. So they got two tough games there. And then Pittsburgh has, if I remember right, thought theirs was a little bit easier, but I'll try and pull it up. See if I can pull that up for you.
Well,
Yeah, it
really,
looks like they
really
have
quickly. Go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
they have Boston, Nashville, and the Islanders to close out the year. Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so kind of a few interesting games. It almost kind of solidifies the fact that I mean the Islanders will be in the playoffs, especially if they beat Pittsburgh. Um, so I really think it's going to come down to Washington and 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 the Penguins. I think I'm going to say Capitals get in.
Crazy.
That's just my
So you
prediction.
you made a comment though about Sidney Crosby terrorizing your team for all these years. Nick, as a Philadelphia Flyers fan, you can probably relate to that. What do you think about what Sidney Crosby's doing? Like impressed, or are you like, oh, I can't stand this guy?
Well, I think it's both. I've never liked Sidney Crosby for obvious reasons as a Flyers fan, and I don't think he's terrorized any team more than the Flyers and throughout his
That's
illustrious
what I think
career.
too.
And you know what though, honestly, like how can you not respect and just like my mind's blown with how good he's been this year at his age. Like it's ridiculous. And I mean, he's still way up there. He's literally taken this team. They traded away one of his best friends at the trade deadline, and he's still grabbed this team and he's dragging them to the playoffs. Like it's unbelievable what he's done there. And I think they're gonna be that second wild card team, and I think he's just basically willing that team into the playoffs. They're just everybody's along for the ride on his back right now.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I still think it's going to be the Penguins. I kind of hope it is the Penguins. I think it'd be kind of cool to see, like, I think Jimmy said it, like Crosby giving Dubas the old "F you, we're going to the playoffs," even though you traded away my right hand man here. Um, so Jimmy, your Rangers tough loss tonight
Mm-hmm.
against the Philadelphia Flyers, and you seem a little bit concerned, bud.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm concerned. You have back-to-back losses against teams that are sort of ramping up for the playoffs, and in a couple games where the Rangers look to be sort of just going through the motions. I don't know whether it's just they're looking towards sort of the playoffs or whatnot, but they have a real opportunity to win the Eastern Conference and possibly the President's Trophy. Now, does that mean you're the best team in the NHL? To me, no. But I think home ice is extremely important for the simple fact that you get home ice and you get last change in Game 7. Plus, you get the crowd behind you. So I'd like to see them lock that down. In terms of playoff matches, I know fans and stuff talk about teams they'd want to play or they don't want to play in the first round. Like, I think if you worry about that, then how good is your team really? I you're playing the top half of the league. Okay. Say what you want about wild card one, wild card two, first, second, third. They're all good. Just basically the teams at the top have just been more consistent. So a lot of it is how hot are you at the right time. Pittsburgh concerns me. You know, they're 7-0-3 in their last 10. Obviously the Crosby factor, but I also look at it too. In the last couple of playoff series, the Rangers have beat the Penguins with a much loaded roster, and I have a lot of faith in New York. They've been good 5-on-5 since the trade deadline, not so much prior. Obviously, their power play is heating up, and obviously Igor Shesterkin back there gives me a lot of faith. But also, I'm a Rangers fan, and I've experienced a lot of pain and disappointment. So I wouldn't also be surprised if I sitting there after round one just pondering life.
Yeah, and we all remember what happened to the Boston Bruins last year with the Florida Panthers. So don't sleep on them, that's for sure.
So Jimmy, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So the Rangers' last game is on the 15th, and they don't think the playoffs are going to start till the 20th or the 21st. How nervous would you be if they're playing a real hot team and they haven't played in a week before the game one?
I think looking at their schedule in March, which was atrocious. I think they played 15 games or 14 games. And I knew they were going to finish early. I'm not concerned at all. I think they need the rest. I think a few guys are banged up right now. Obviously, Mika took that hit against the Islanders, and I don't know what it is. It sounds like he's going to play Saturday against or Saturday against the Islanders. He played tonight. I think there's some guys that need some rest on that team, so I'm actually welcoming the early finish rather than going in sort of 2 days in. They came out guns a-blazing after the All-Star break, and they had a lot of time because I think they had a bit of a break even leading up to the All-Star break, so they had this like very big extended break. So I think this team thrives when it has some rest. So I like it, especially for this time of year. Guys are injured, so
Yeah.
lots of practice time too. There'll be video. Hopefully, they can clean some of the defensive lapses up that they've been having. The big concern that I have though with them is they're not a very good north-south team. if you look at, they're one of the top teams in terms of creating East-West chances, and typically in the playoffs, those kind of go away. They really remind me of the Andrew Brunette Florida Panthers, the one that got I think it was swept by Tampa, where, the game in the playoff just changes a lot. And like, I hope I'm wrong, but I mean, that's obviously my concern there is I don't know how that East-West game is going to translate this year. And to be honest, it'll all fall on Igor anyway. So, first round, I think they should win. I think they've been a pretty good team, and the expectation is that they should win the first round regardless. But after that, I think it gets a little dicey.
So that's kind of the East right now. The all the action in the East is kind of happening down in that wild card position, and obviously we got to touch on the Rangers because Jimmy loves the Rangers, and that's just the way this is going to be. This is our podcast, and we talk about what we want to talk about. So, anyways, before we hit record, Nick kind of made a comment about the Vancouver Canucks in the Western Conference. Why don't you tell us a little bit what you were thinking there?
So I mean, I was looking at I was thinking about this today in preparation, and I'm looking at LA, I'm looking at Nashville, I'm looking at Vegas, and I mean the three teams that they're probably going to play, they're going to be Dallas, Vancouver, and Edmonton. And if I'm one of those three teams, I want Vancouver because I think they're right for getting upset in the first round of the playoffs. Demko, it looks like he's going to be back for the playoffs, but I don't know. I don't think they're built for the playoffs. And I think they had a really, really good first half of the year. And I think you touched on it. I think it was last episode before, Jimmy, about their PDO and how good they were in the first half. And I mean, it's come back down. They've come back down to earth. Like, it wasn't that long ago that they had a double-digit lead in their division, and it's down to 4 points. They could potentially not win their division after they were up. I'm pretty sure at one point they were up by as many as 14 or 15. Like, they were way up there. Like, if I'm LA, if I'm Nashville, if I'm Vegas, even St. Louis is an outside chance, I want Vancouver in the first round because I think that's a path for those teams to get to the next round.
Yeah, there's just something about Vancouver I don't particularly like. Although if Thatcher Demko, I don't know if he's back or not yet. He could be a difference maker, but I think their penalty kill is just shy under 80%. It's about 78%. So I worry about there, especially special teams in close games. And then the fact that their secondary scoring is completely dried up. That's a bit of a concern. And Pettersson just hasn't seemed to really look the same that he did in the first half of the season either. So there's definitely concerns if I was a Vancouver fan about playing those teams. I know LA and Nashville have sort of petered off as well, like in terms of like that really hot run, especially Nashville. But yeah, I think you're right. I think if there's going to be a sort of an upset in the first round, I think Vancouver's the one everybody's sort of looking at going, yeah, I could see. I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas, Nashville, or LA actually won. So even though there's question marks on those teams as well.
Yeah.
And do you guys think the Oilers can catch the Canucks? Like, they have 2 games in hand and they're only down by 4 points. They're only behind Vancouver by 4 points. Like, for me as a Flames fan, can't stand the Oilers, but it seems like every time I look, they're winning. And I believe the Oilers can catch the Canucks. Well, they can, but do you guys believe they will?
Nick, you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I think, well, they play each other on Saturday. So that's going to be a huge game. And that one's sandwiched in between Edmonton. They have Arizona, then then San Jose, and then Arizona. And then they finish the year with California or Colorado, sorry. I mean, I think they can win their next 4 games. And and I think at that point, I mean, if they beat Van on Saturday, I think Edmonton wins the division.
I think, that'll be interesting. I think it all predicates on that matchup as well, because I think if they lose to Vancouver, they play the 15, 17, 18. I think they start resting players around there because it's a bit of like they got the 3 home games and then they got to go out on the road. You got to think like some of their big guns probably aren't playing back to back, especially Arizona and Colorado. And And then there's that 2 day window before the playoffs start, right? So you probably want to give like Connor, Draisaitl, some of those guys maybe 3 days rest. Um, but if they beat Vancouver and there's a close chance, and it makes it kind of interesting to see how Knobloch's gonna sort of manage that. But oh, there's definitely a chance. I mean, they're all winnable games, right?
Yeah.
And it's, they won three in a row, and the Oilers typically are a team that is momentum driven based either one way or the other, right? They're either on big heaters or they're struggling. So it doesn't seem to be an in between with them over the last however many years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder what it does for a team even mentally when you're kind of in first place and in the driver's seat from bell to bell, and if you were to kind of lose that pole position right at the end of the year, how that would affect your mental state going into the playoffs, or I think Rick Tocchet's a great coach, and I think he'll have these guys ready to go for playoffs. But yeah, you want to finish first overall. You want to have that advantage of playing a wild card team. So just my thoughts, and yeah, with that, we are gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna talk about this 100 assists versus 70 goals again, and then we will have some obituaries for some teams that are eliminated from playoff contention. So hang tight, and we will be right back. Hey guys, so last week we talked briefly about supporting friends and local businesses, and we did Jimmy and his son Josh's video company that they want to start up. And believe it or not, guys, we've had people reach out and want to work with those guys through the podcast. So great opportunity today, and I'm going to be promoting my friend Joel. Joel Morris has a vinyl fencing company. It's that time of year where people are looking to get fences done. Somebody actually asked me today if I knew someone who does fences, and of course I'll send them to Joel. He has his company called Morris Vinyl Works. So any kind of vinyl fencing you guys might want done, give Joel a call. His number is 780-983-3040, and tell him the Cheap Seats podcast sent you guys. He'll take care of you. Again, Joel is been doing this for about 11 years. I started this business in 2013, so he knows what he's doing. And yeah, he'll take care of you. I know he's a loyal listener to the Cheap Seats, and we appreciate that. If you guys want any of your company or business promoted on our podcast, we'd love to hook you guys up. So yeah, we'll get you back to the show. All right, we're back. Yeah, ad reads. Crazy, hey? New thing.
You're a natural, Phil.
I know. I'm the best. I'm the best at it. So anyways, yeah, we're back. So Connor McDavid got his 99th assist against the Flames on Saturday. Got slightly injured in that game also, so he missed the game yesterday where the Oilers beat up on the Vegas Golden Knights pretty good. It's funny because Nick put it in the chat today. It seems like he gets excited every time Kucherov gets an assist, because tonight he's like, oh, 98. So Kucherov's also like right there. My thoughts on I was talking to some Oiler fans about it, and one of them said, I don't think Connor McDavid cares about getting 100 assists. I would disagree with that. I don't know if you guys watched that Flames Oilers game on Saturday night. Was it Connor and I don't remember who he was going in on, like 2-on-0, but they like passed it back and forth like 6 times and it ended up in the corner. I don't even know if they got a
It
shot.
was Hyman, wasn't it?
Was it?
I think it was Hyman.
You remember that play, Nick?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was Hyman.
So that right there tells me I think Connor McDavid wants to get 100 assists. Obviously, you'd want to get 100 assists. But yeah, kind of a race you probably didn't expect. Like you kind of think maybe Connor McDavid getting 100 assists is gonna blow whoever is second in assists out of the water, but Kucherov just seems to stick with him. Nick, what do you think about that?
I mean, for me, for both of those guys, it has to mean something. Like we're talking about a stat or a season that Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, and Mario Lemieux are the only three players in NHL history to get to 100 assists at least of the year. Like those are three of the best players of all time. Like anybody who says that those guys don't care, I don't believe that for a second. That is like hitting the century mark in assists is unbelievable. The race to me is it's fascinating because like Kucherov 2 games ago was at 93. He's got 5 assists in his last 2 games, right? Like that the gap was 99 to 93 a couple of days ago, and now it's like 99, 98. And I know Connor didn't play the other yesterday, but I mean, like, to me, that is an unbelievable. It's an unbelievable race. It's gone beyond. It's not just points; it's assists. Like getting triple digit assists in a season is unreal. And we're almost doubling the amount of players that have done it in history in one season with 2 guys. To me, it's crazy.
Yeah, and Jimmy, you kind of made a comment too about how crazy this season has been. Like we talk about, you potentially have two players hitting 100 assists. Like to get 100 points in the NHL is a huge deal. And we talked about this a couple episodes ago, where I think what year, like the year like Jamie Benn got like the most points was like 80 some points. Like, and that was like the
Yeah,
top
it's
point getter in the league that year. Like this was like mid like 2010 era, somewhere in there. I don't even remember what year it was, but
and the crazy part about that is I think he was at he was at 83 going into that game because I think Voracek or was it Tavares had the lead. He got 4 points in that last game for the Dallas Stars to eventually win it. But yeah, like I said, I can't really put my finger on it, but the game's getting faster and the players are getting more skilled, and the way they're shooting the puck now and the stick technology and like all of it, and just like the way these kids process the game, like 100 assists, like I don't think people really understand like how fast you have to be able to process the game. And not only that, but I mean, you can't turn pucks over as well, right? Like passing with that
or
kind
it's
of
in the back of
pinpoint
your net, right?
accuracy. Yeah, and so they pass with pinpoint accuracy, and it's timing too, right? You're also relying on, spatial awareness. You're relying on your players going to, getting to the right spots as well. Like every playmaker, it's all about timing, in my opinion. And, and then we're also at the same time witnessing possibly a 70 goal score, which it is
Yeah,
hard,
transition us into that, Jimmy.
hard to score. I can't imagine like trying to get a goal, basically just under a goal a game. I can't even fathom it. Like especially with the way the game is coached, and also, they got iPads on the benches. There's video coaching has evolved, you know, beyond whatever systems. The goalies are, they're big and athletic. Like it's kind of rare to have a goalie who's under 6 feet, right? So you're not shooting against pylons, right? So um I what we're witnessing, I think it gets lost, especially on social media and stuff, because people just complain about what's better and what's worse and whatever. And I'm like, dude, just enjoy it. Because I don't know
Yeah.
if we'll see it again. Maybe we will. Maybe this is a new era. Maybe this is like the new 80s where these type of seasons are going to happen forever. But there are some of the best players we've ever seen right now just playing. Look at the heart race, right? So
Yeah, and even like you look at kids like coming up, like we get to watch Connor Bedard do the same thing, and the kid's an absolute stud, and um yeah, just it's unreal. It's unreal the kind of skill like coming into the league, and when we get closer to draft time, we'll be able to talk more about kids coming into the league and kids potentially being drafted into the NHL, and um yeah, it should be good because you never know, like Maybe there's
Oh,
someone even better coming down the pipe here.
there's so many coming. Like if you even look at some of the guys that are drafted that aren't here yet, like San Jose's got a prospect in Will Smith, very good player.
Leonard.
Um, yeah, Meshar out of Montreal. He's a guy that down the road could have 100 assists. His hockey IQ's off the charts. Demidov, Michkov, like it's gonna be
Yeah,
scary how good
and
this league's gonna be.
yeah, and Nick's very well versed in the new NHL players coming in too. So like who do you like coming in as a young player, Nick?
I mean, for me right now, it's all about Macklin Celebrini. I think he's really really good. Guys that have already been drafted, or guys that Jimmy just mentioned. Like there's Will Smith and the Mitch Koff, Leonard, Perot, like just some of these really really skilled guys, and the league is just awesome. The kids coming up are really really good. There's so much talent. I mean, you look at what Connor Bedard's done this year. I mean, he missed time, and he's still like every time you watch him play, like it's really really amazing to watch how he's transitioned to the NHL. And I think he's broke. I think he has the record now for most points by a first overall pick in the rookie season. I think I saw that the other day. Like it's ridiculous how good these kids are, and everything's just going to keep getting better. Like this year, you got Iginla coming up, who's going to be a really good pro. I think he's scoring a lot. Just out of the West for sure, you got Berkeley Catton and Caden Lindstrom. Those are three pretty good forwards coming out of the Western Hockey League. So, and even Macklin Celebrini is a Western Canadian kid as well. There's just lots of real good talent coming up.
Yeah, it's unreal, and some of those teams that are going to be grabbing some of these players are looking at the lottery pick this year. So Jimmy had an idea that we go over a few of those teams and kind of what's next for some of those teams. So we got a couple of teams each that we're gonna go over. So Jimmy, why don't you start us off?
Sure.
Who did you get? Who did you get for your
I
teams
got
there?
I got well, I got Montreal and Anaheim, so you can tell me where you want me to start, and
Let's go with
we'll go from
Montreal.
there. Okay. So Montreal, obviously, my son was pretty excited. He's a huge Habs fan, and he kept telling me you got to say all good things about them. And Cole Caulfield's a generational player, which he's not, but that's fine. Very good young player, but not generational. Um, yeah, Montreal's one of those teams where honestly, if I was a GM and I wanted to inherit a team, they'd be right up there just based on sort of the prospects that they have, the way their salary cap is structured right now. I think they don't have any real massive arbitrage contracts, although you could argue maybe Brendan Gallagher's is not the best, maybe Josh Anderson in terms of what they're getting for production. But the big thing is they're not going to have to pay anybody a super boatload of money. I really like their back end. I think their forward group for next year's uh, pretty much set. I think Meshar probably has a shot of making this team, and then I think their blue line is outstanding right now. Obviously, when you don't make the playoffs, you can always attribute it to these teams having very young blue lines. Right now, the Habs, counting right off the bat, I think there's only two defensemen over the age of 23, which is Matheson and Savard. So they got a couple veterans there, but you got Justin Barron, who they got as part of the Lehkonen trade of Colorado. They got Jordan Harris. They got Strubble. They got Caden Gooley, played for the Oil Kings, has been a stud this year. Plus they've got, Xhekaj, who's a bit of a tougher defenseman. And then they got more defensemen coming. They got Lane Hudson and David Reinbracker, who are, I mean, it's just a plethora of riches. Logan Malamo or Mally, gosh, I can't pronounce that name. Malio. And then you look at their net, right? Like Caden Primo and Montebo, like it's just like a nice combination. Montebo looks like he's entering his prime. Primo's 24 and he's had a lot of time to develop. So that's a team that I really like moving forward. I know it's been, kind of, rebuilds are always kind of rough, but I think they're doing it the right way. And I think they've got good coaching, and obviously they've drafted and appear to be developing quite well.
All right, let's move on to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Nick, you were pretty excited to talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets. Why don't you go ahead with them?
Well, I'm fascinated by Columbus, and a lot of it has to do with what they've done the last couple off seasons, right? They acquired Line a couple years ago. They signed Goudreau last off season, June 6th and June 9th. They traded for Ivan Provorov. They traded for Damon Severson. So I don't think they consider themselves a team that's rebuilding. I think they consider themselves a team that should be competing for the playoffs. And they hire Mike Babcock, which is an indication that they think they're going to be a team that's going to compete. You're not hiring him to come in and develop guys, not at this point. And of course, all the stuff happens before even training camp starts. And so Babcock is gone. Then have in steps Pascal Vincent, who for me, that's probably the toughest spot. You haven't had a summer to prepare as a head coach. And all of a sudden you're thrown into the head coaching spot. And it's a tough spot for the coach. And so when I was going through this, I kind of came up with three things that I think Columbus needs to focus on this year. I think for them, number one is the Laine's wellness. They need Patrick Laine to, get himself through the NHL Player Assistance Program, recover from whatever is going on in his life. Because when he's on, we're talking about a guy that's, going to score 30, 40 goals for you. And they need that offense. Also, for me, they need to get this GM search right. It can't just be John Davidson's buddy. It's got to be, if they're replacing Yarmo, it has to be somebody that's going to come in and make sure that, he's ready to continue to make the moves to make this team better. He needs the new GM. His top priority has to be finding a way to elevate Johnny Gaudreau, right? And that to me is finding a proper center until Adam Fantilli really is ready to be that top line guy. I think Adam Fantilli is going to be a fantastic hockey player, but next year he's going to be 20. That's a lot of pressure on him. So the first player that came to my mind that Columbus should look for this offseason, and Phil, you know this, that he had a really, really good rapport with Johnny Gaudreau, and he's a UFA this offseason, is Elias Lindholm. He's a guy that Columbus is going to have a lot of cap space this year. They have a lot of RFAs to sign, but they have about $21 million or so in cap space, according to Cap Friendly right now for next year. And I don't think Elias Lindholm's going to cost you a lot. And he's going to be looking to try and get back on track. And him and Johnny Gaudreau were really, really good together. And if you could have a line of Laine, Lindholm, and Gaudreau, I think you could potentially I think that elevates all three of those guys. And I think it makes them a more competitive team next year for sure.
Yeah, good thoughts. And maybe that's just what the doctor ordered for both of those players in Lindholm and Gaudreau is a reunion in Columbus. So yeah, good thoughts on Columbus. I picked the Arizona, or should I say Utah Coyotes. So Arizona Coyotes, the dumping grounds of the NHL. Like I was kind of looking around, like doing research for this, and like they still have guys like Voracek and Shea Weber and Brian Little as salary dumps, and this team's kind of been like the laughing stock of the NHL because they're playing in a college arena, and it's almost just become like a gimmick for them. So if like I know Gary Bettman kind of does whatever he can to like protect this team and save this team, and I don't know if what their fate is, if they're gonna go to Salt Lake, or if they're staying in Arizona. Like it doesn't really matter. It's the same team. But just looking at these guys, I think they've got 13 picks this year in the draft. They've got 3 picks in the second round, 3 picks in the third round. And yeah, they've just got an opportunity here in the next couple of years. They've got like 22 picks in the next 2 years to really, kind of stock the cupboards because Nick, like you can probably attest to this, like when Arizona steps up to the podium and they pick Dmitry Simashev last year ahead of a guy like Ryan Leonard, like we're all kind of standing there as they're up there in their burgundy suits, kind of shaking your head, like, what are these guys doing and what are they up to? Um, but you know, maybe they know something we don't. But when I look at the Coyotes, like I do think they have some really good young talent too. Like some of the players coming up that we've talked about. Like they've got Clayton Keller, they've got uh Dylan Gunther, and players like that. Who else do they have there? Logan Cooley. Um, so they're in an interesting spot right now. Um. But yeah, for the Phoenix Coyotes, I think their next step is to just really stock the cupboards in the next couple of years with all these draft picks. Jimmy, Anaheim.
Yeah, Anaheim was an intriguing one for me. I was going to ask you, Phil, who's going to play defense for them next year? Because I don't
I
think they
don't
have anyone
know.
under contract. But it's wild
Valimaki,
to
I
me that
guess.
this team potentially could have had Mitchkov or Zach Benson or Ryan Leonard
Yeah,
on that team. A
yeah, yeah.
combination of two of the three.
It's
That's just a metaphor for what the Coyotes are.
and I think that was it. Like I think I just look at this team and they're just it is. It's like they're a bit of a mess. Like and yeah, you're right. They've got nobody signed on defense next year. So maybe
You know,
maybe you and me,
one
bud. Maybe we should go.
one well, yeah, it can't be any worse. No, like I think one of the larger issues too is they're almost forced now to draft guys who are 2, 3, 4 years away because of the way, the same problem we kept talking about with Buffalo. I mean, you get all these picks and prospects, but at the end of the day, like they all can't play. And you only get 50 NHL contracts as well. So
Yeah.
you can
And
have
you
13
and you got to
picks,
hit that
but
cap. You got to hit the cap floor too, right?
well, maybe, that was I think Nick made a great point on Elias Lindholm, and one of the things I was going to mention too is that if he's looking for big money, Columbus might be the team that may have to slightly overpay to get him, and they're also we would be fit, but you know uh, we'll see. Or they're going to do their thing. I'm sure there'll be a dumping ground again for bad contracts to get to that floor and whatnot. But yeah, just a bit of a mess. But yeah, anyways, Coyotes for another day. Um, Anaheim's an intriguing one for me because there's a lot of sort of looks like there's going to be a logjam at center with looks like Cutter's going to be probably on the team next year, and you've got Leo Carlson, and that's a pretty darn good 1-2 punch down the middle, and that leaves sort of Zegras in that three hole. And if you've all watched Trevor Zegras play, he's not a third line center. I think he's kind of a little bit of a one dimensional sort of skilled forward. And I wonder if they end up moving him at some point. A lot of talk about Montreal. Montreal's got a lot of defensemen, and we had talked about as well. So potential trade for Trevor Zegras. I'm sure Verbeek's probably going to be looking at that. That's probably what I'd be doing. The only issue with that, though, is you're probably trading him when his value is at his lowest, because he's proven that he can hit the 60-point mark, and he is only 23, so we don't know what his ceiling is yet. But I like Anaheim in terms they got some young D, obviously Zellweger and Mintyukov as well. Mintyukov's going to be an absolute stud. And having Fowler and Gudis for the next 3 years, I think their D's looking all right. I'd like to see them either trade for a defenseman or add a defenseman. I know every year Gibson comes up in trade conversations, but I don't think he's going anywhere. So the goaltending will be the same. But I would like to see them maybe move Zegras for a defenseman who can play now in that lineup, because if you look at the Ducks, I think especially early on, and I didn't double check it, but they played a lot of 1-goal games. They got, they still got Frank Vetrano next year. I think this is a team that is, if they can make a couple tweaks and moves, like obviously they're not going to knock out some of those teams ahead of them, but I think if they could get some value for Trevor Zegras, especially on that back end for maybe a guy who's sort of a little more proven, that's something that I would probably do.
Yeah, I watched Anaheim live a couple weeks ago when they were in Edmonton, and they had a really really young decor, and they definitely, like, I agree, Jimmy. They definitely need one or two one or two guys, defensemen that can play now, because Cam Fowler played a ton. Minchikov was really, really good, and so was Zellweger. But those guys are 20 years old, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's, when you're throwing those guys out, and they had Vakanainen was there, they had a couple other guys, and their D was really young, and they really struggled against the speed of the Oilers. Like, I agree, they really do need one or two veteran guys that can at least come in there and take some minutes away from some of those younger guys, just so as they continue to get their feet wet. Because, I mean, let's be honest, the Pacific's a hard division to play in. And if you're learning on the fly against Vegas and Edmonton and LA and, Vancouver, and you could probably throw Calgary in there too. They got some good guys up front. Like, it's not an easy division to get started in when, you're basically the cannon fodder for all the other teams.
Well, I think I like one of the things I'll give them credit for is how they've deployed sort of some of those young D-men, even though they're probably getting a lot more responsibility than they probably should. The issue for me, from what I've seen, is that Cam Fowler's got too much responsibility.
Yeah, 100%.
And if you can shove him slightly down the lineup into that second pairing, like I don't know who they could go out and get, but like you said, if you're dangling Trevor Zegras, and like say what you want about Zegras, there all the teams would at least inquire, because he's definitely worth a look. He's got a pretty good contract. He's only making just under 6, and he's only 23, and he's talented. I just think it's gone wrong for him in Anaheim, and he's the type of guy that, almost looking at the type of trade where, Kirby Dach goes to Montreal type deal. I know Doc's been hurt a ton, but I think when he's been healthy and was getting momentum, you could start to see he was becoming the player that everyone thought he would. But yeah, definitely, all these teams, you could say, need defensemen. Like, you don't win in the National Hockey League without having your defensemen properly slotted. So yeah, definitely, I don't know what that option would look like, but definitely Anaheim's going to have to shore up that blue line for sure, especially in a Pacific Division that's loaded with offensive talent. So
yeah.
Hey, moving on, Nick, I'll let you pick. So this is supposed to be for teams that are down and out and done and out of the playoffs. You feel the Philadelphia Flyers are out. We also talked Ottawa Senators. So you pick Ottawa or Philly. You can do your obituary for either team. Go ahead.
You know what? I'm gonna say Philly, because they're not officially out. They're only 1 point out. I think they're done. But I'm gonna say Philly, so I'm gonna go with Ottawa.
Okay.
So again, I kind of went with the 3 key things for what I think the team needs to do. Number one, we know Jacques Martin's done after the year. They need to find a coach. They need to find a coach that's going to be able to, like, they have a very talented forward group. They need to find a coach that's going to be able to deploy the talent, get some goals. But I mean, their goaltending is set, and Eunice Korpisalo has not given a lot of confidence this year after signing that deal last year. They need to implement a system that's gonna control and help shield him a little bit. They need Shane Pinto right for the beginning of the year. He's been a really, really effective player, and he's an RFA at the end of this year. They need to have him signed. They need him in training camp. He has to start the beginning of the year next year for Ottawa. And the other thing, they also need to figure out what's going to happen with Jacob Chychrun, because he's he's free. I think he's UFA after next year. And they already have, going into next year with Sanderson's extension, $21 million in AAV tied up with Shabbat, Sanderson, and Zub. I don't know if there's room for Chychrun. Like, how much more money can you throw $8 million at him and be almost at $30 million for 4 D-man? I don't know if that works in today's economics in the NHL. So I think they need to figure out what they're going to do with him. And lastly, they really need to figure out They need to assess Josh Norris's health. I mean, he was one of the main pieces that came back in that Erik Karlsson trade. They need him. When he's playing, he's a really good hockey player. If their centers going forward are Stützle, Norris, and Pinto, that's three pretty good centers. That's three pretty good top three centers. But and he's signed through 2030 at just under $8 million. They need to figure out, hopefully his shoulder will finally heal. But I think this is at least his second surgery on his shoulders. Like, they need Josh Norris, they need Shane Pinto, and they really ultimately they need a coach that's going to come in there. Steve Stais has to figure it out. He's got to find a guy, because there's no reason for this team, in my opinion, to be not at least in the playoff conversation. They should have been in the playoff conversation at least this year, and they weren't. Next year they have to be there. There's way too much talent for me.
And not only that, but they're not young anymore. Like,
No,
not saying that they're old, but they're all entering that prime age, and it's kind of like, okay, and they've committed a lot of money to a lot of these different players. Chychrun's an interesting one because he can play. They have a lot of defensemen who can both play the left and right side. And I think they've struggled all year to figure out sort of how they're going to deploy those pairs. I agree with you, though. Like, I don't think they can hand out another $8 million. So I don't know what they do with Chychrun, but I do agree next year, or even going into the summer again, do you trade him? Do you keep him? It's such a tough. I think whoever or Staios has just got a very difficult job. And in terms of head coach, I'm going to put you on the spot, but is there anyone out there that you think would be a good fit for this team to come in and be the head coach?
I'd have to probably look at a little bit more and see who's available. But I mean, we're about a week away from firing season for coaches too. And there might be a guy, like a guy who might be okay. He's shown in the past that he can work with young guys, and I don't know if he's going to have a job beyond this season. Maybe is Dave Haxtell from Seattle. He was, I don't know, like after the drop that the Kraken have taken this year, maybe he stays, maybe he goes. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
He could be a guy, like I remember in Philadelphia, like he did a really good job with younger guys and getting everybody going, and he might be an option. But I'd have to look at some of the other guys. My guess is there's probably at least a handful of AHL guys that would be able to work with these players. There's a lot of good young coaches out there. So
absolutely. Yeah, I don't mean to put I was like perfect world if you could grab anyone almost like but yeah, that's actually a really good one. Ottawa's interesting. It's just it's almost like it's spent so many years just waiting for this team to explode. But the one thing I worry about too is just kind of that goaltending position. I never really thought Korpisalo was the answer, and obviously Forsberg is what he is, and I'm wondering about the other goalie there. Is it Soderberg? No, he's in Chicago. Sogard.
Yeah.
Well, he's 23. Yeah, he's 23. Like, is he sort of a guy that maybe, or could kind of come in at some point? Like, goalies kind of develop a little later. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Sogard?
I mean, he's a guy that I think he can push Forsberg. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's going to push Korpisalo out. I mean, when you're paying a goalie $5 million, chances are, especially when you don't really have a secondary option, like Edmonton has Campbell, but they also have Skinner, right? Skinner can take over that job and be fine. Ottawa doesn't have a Stuart Skinner right now, right? Maybe Sogar becomes that guy, but I think at this point, I think they should just hope that he pushes Forsberg and they can give him some more starts next year. But I think ultimately it's funny. His nickname is the Corpedo, and I think he Corpedoed their season this year. I think at the end of the day, they're gonna Korpisalo's their guy at least through next year, and maybe they'll see what they have with Sogard. But yeah, like I don't know if Sogard's gonna be able to push him out just based on what they're paying him. And
no, for sure. I think they just need league average goaltending.
Yeah, and they haven't even been close to that this year.
No, and it hasn't helped. And I look at the blue line. I mean, right now, I like the flexibility in terms of left and right side.
Oh, yeah, like it's funny. Their blue line is quite deep. Like if you look at like their guys, mm-hmm. like the fact that they lose as many games as they do is quite interesting because. like every one of their guys is like Shabbat, Chikrin, Brandstrom's pretty good. Like Hamannik's okay, Sanderson, like Zub, like they have a lot of good players on their back end, and but Corpusalo has not been good enough. Like what's
Do you
his
do you
save
think it's that
percentage? 891.
Eesh. Do you think it's that simple that it just comes down to they just need better goalie and
I
maybe
think so.
a slightly better deployment, maybe a fresh face, like you said, coaching
You've been
goalie?
a pretty big proponent of goaltending this on since we started this podcast and how far goaltending gets you, Jimmy. So
It's true though.
It's
Like
the most
it
important
is.
position in the game.
Yeah.
Like you
It,
talked about it a little bit earlier on. Um, when you're in the playoffs, goalie if your team's not going, your goalie can steal you a game.
Mhm.
And if you don't have, but if you don't have a goalie that could steal you a game in the middle of December in the regular season, you're toast. Like you have to have
yeah,
a goalie that when your guys aren't going, because let's be honest, if you play 4 series of 7 games, you're playing 28 games. Your team is not going to show up for all 28 games. There's going to be games where you're not going to play well, but you're going to need your goalie to steal you a game every now and then, to keep you in a
yeah,
game, to keep you afloat if you have a slow start. And if you don't have that guy, you're toast.
yeah, not many teams get away with winning a Stanley Cup without, I mean, look at the performances. Like I think the last time there was a pretty I mean, you look at Kempler, obviously with Colorado, he didn't have a great playoff, but Colorado was also just an absolute monster of a team. But
yeah.
you look at the Shesterkin and the 22 Rangers. I mean, they weren't supposed to be there. Like that was first year in the playoffs coming out of a rebuild. They weren't even supposed to make the playoffs that year.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And
look at Bobrovsky last year in Florida.
yep, all
He
knocked out
was,
arguably a juggernaut.
yeah, like he was like as soon as they switched to him, he was unbelievable. Like it was
Yeah.
that's like you need that guy. You want to win today? Like there's a reason Tampa Bay won back-to-back Stanley Cups.
Yeah, goaltending. And
Like
on that note, boys, we are out of time. Um, so we got to wrap up this episode because we're gonna get cut off right away here any second. But Nick, thank you so much for jumping on with us this week.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Jimmy, as always, a pleasure. Guys, you can find us on all of the platforms, X, my apologies, Facebook, YouTube, um, Instagram. Thanks again for listening. I hope you guys, this is a long episode, so if you're still here, thank you so much. And yeah, let us know what you thought of Nick if you want us to get him on again. So on behalf of
Absolutely.
the cheap seats, thanks for listening. Have a good weekend. Yeah, good weekend. It's Friday.